And Zoe's going to do 2 songs to start us off, and she's going to do 2 songs now and 1 song later, and these are all songs that she's written. Is that true?
Yep.
That's true.
Awesome. Hi guys, look at all your full faces. Holy crow. Oh, I forgot what all your chins looked like. I was just about to say this to Tanya, so I guess I'll open up our conversation to the rest of the room. But it's been a really interesting summer for me creatively. I keep having these waves of new songs and stories, and I started writing a Disney song the other day just for fun, you know? Like things are just pouring out right now. And yeah, this is one of them from this spring. It's called Moonlight, and sort of thinking about the how easy it is to feel like there is one right path that you're supposed to be on, but finding comfort in the interim, the gray space, the not knowing the process, the making part of life. Yeah. There we go. I'm circling above the meadow. Yes, I know. The silent hunt from height to shadow. I couldn't find the right wind to drift me through the honey sky. Yes, I know. But in the moonlight, I can see it. In the moonlight, I can see it. Oh. My legacy might only be the words I say that outpace me. No, I don't tend to settle places others understand. No, I don't. But in the moonlight, I can see it. In the moonlight, I can see it. In the moonlight, I can see it. Oh. I can see it all. I can feel it all. I can see it all. I can feel it all. I can see it all. I can feel it all. I can see it all. I can feel it all. I can feel it. Thank you. Working out the cobwebs of the morning voice, you know. This next one is kind of a funny tune. It's called Ridge Runner. And I wrote it about all the people in this area and the resourcefulness that comes pouring out of all the backyards and the kitchens and the wood shops and the studios of all different kinds. and how easy it is to not see that happening on the front street and to pass through town and to think there's nothing going on here. But how very wrong that is. There's nothing to do here. There's nobody cool here. This place is so friggin' boring. You're doing it wrong. You're just so very wrong. But I just had a light bulb. You must be right. So you better just move along. What's really right is that gradient of light. And I know you're gonna love the view on the next hillside. There's no one funner than a rich runner. Who knows there's nothing we can't do. No one burns brighter than a sunset fighter, disappearing in the trees like evening dew. My neighbor grew this. I made all of that. Oh, and don't forget, when you're through, I'm gonna need those mason jars back. We're in our backyard, and it's just as well. After a proper drinking, think you might come by here a spell. There's no one funner than a rich runner. Who knows there's nothing we can't do. No one burns brighter than a sunset fighter, disappearing in the trees like evening dew. I walk these roads often, down to the base of the lake, right where the stream starts under the bridge, with the snapping turtle laying her eggs. Here's the cow I see daily, and I call her Chuck. Her real name is Dolly or something like that, but I don't give up. There's no one funner than a rich runner. Who knows there's nothing we can't do. No one burns brighter than a sunset fighter, disappearing in the trees like evening dew. Disappearing in the trees like evening dew.
Woohoo.
That was close. I'm gonna unplug Bill.
There's no one funner than a rich runner.
Thank you.
I love the way you started your explanation for Rich Runner, the front street versus the backyards, and that's almost exactly what the service is about today. It's about the places where you look for healing or strength that sometimes don't actually give it, and the hidden places that do. The counterintuitive thing that actually heals your life versus the thing that you think will, and you try over and over again. What was the Einstein line about insanity? The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Yeah.
I think it's actually a fake Einstein line, but
A fake Einstein line, but yeah.
It still works.
It still works, yeah. Perfect. Okay, so our prayer request for today, just so many things touch your heart. We just had a really brilliant time at a cottage, Mary Ellen and I, and Zoe was there too some of the time, and then Isaac and Nancy came up with Sullivan, their Shiba Inu, and we had a great time. It was a sort of a time of overcoming obstacles, that's how we describe it, because the cottage was very rustic, rustic. And it was raining hard at first, and there was no internet. Ultimately there was, but it wasn't working at first, and there was no power a couple of times. And our closest neighbors were earwigs. They were in everything. Apparently that's never happened before, but anyway, this turned out to be one of the greatest vacations, actually. So it was on a farm on Grand Lake, and there was a grandfathered lane of cottages in this part of the lake. It just felt like we were completely alone. There were some neighbors that had cottages, but they were a good distance away, and they. The one that was closest is owned by somebody who's in Alberta and hasn't come for years. So we were just in this place that felt like we had our own private beach and the lake was incredible, and there was a nice covered deck. And there weren't any bugs except for earwigs. So we actually had the time of our life as we got used to it, and one thing after another figured out how to overcome the obstacles. And why did I start with that? Why did I bring that up?
The things that touch your heart.
Things that touch your heart. Okay. Then we got home, and for the last couple of years, one of the richest parts of my life has been that I've had a very, very deep friendship with Dr. Spencer, who was our family doctor for 30 years. And more than 2 years ago, his wife asked if I would do a funeral for him, and I said that I would, of course. I'd done a marriage for their daughter and a wedding for their daughter, and I just loved this family. But and I always respected Dr. Spencer, and enjoyed seeing him over 30 years. And we have some stories of how he really helped our family in different situations. But yeah,
Delivered Zoe.
yeah, delivered Zoe, and Isaac. But I just anyway, I said to her, we're on our way to Australia to see Noah and Kara. This was more than 2 years ago. We're on our way to Australia. We're going to be gone for several months. And we're leaving in 3 weeks. And she said, well, he'll be gone before that time. He had a terrible heart failure, several heart events, and a weakened heart, so that he had to be on dialysis. And so anyway, when we got back, we heard a week or two after we got back in the summer 2 years ago that he hadn't died. I just wondered what happened, because I never heard from her again. So I thought he must still be alive. We got home, we heard he was alive. And Joanne asked Mary Ellen when she saw her downtown, or in the store, Superstore, would Pete just go and see him? And so I went, we had a good talk, and so I went back the next week, and it's turned out that I've been seeing him every Friday for the last 2 years, except for the times when he was too sick to see me. And he just became one of my best friends during this period of time. So yesterday we had the service for him. So Friday we had visitation and things, and yesterday it was your heart just gets so open. The service, all we did was his wife chose beautiful pieces of music that he loved, and the children and one grandchild and one adopted family member and one brother shared the things that they loved about their dad. And so it was just a weaving of music and honor, and that's what we did. And it was just, It was just rich. And you know, it just opened up your heart to this good man who served so many people. He was the provincial commissioner for scouting in New Brunswick, and one of his sons wrote this in his letter. My dad was grumpy as we're getting ready for a scouting camping trip, and I asked him, well, why are you doing this? He said, because I hate camping. I said, why are you grumpy? He said, I hate camping. He goes, but you camp all the time. Why do you do that? You're a scout. He goes, I do it because I want to help people. And he said, I just love you, Dad, for this. Everything you did was trying to help people. So the music that was chosen was incredible. He loved classical music, so the prelude music was all nocturnes by Chopin, which he listened to because he couldn't sleep in the last year very well. He was so uncomfortable, and so he at night, when television was boring, he would listen to these piano nocturnes by Chopin. There's a whole series of them, and so that was the prelude music. And then what was next? Next was the flower duet from the opera Lakme, which was from the 1800s. And the flower duet is you just can't believe how beautiful it is. It's two voices, and it was written originally in French in the 1800s, and Lakme is like an Indian princess and her handmaiden, her servant. The two of them are just overwhelmed at the beauty of the flowers. But right in the middle of the lyrics, when you read it in English, my English reading is better than my French reading. Right at the bottom it says, or right in the middle it says, but I am afraid for my father as he goes into this cursed city. The father is a Hindu priest who's leading a celebration. And so there's a hint of foreboding, and of course it's an opera, so it becomes a tragedy. Like in the end there's terrible things that happen, and the father's very involved in making it all worse. And so there's the beauty of the flower duet, which, you know, these voices soaring, and you're just listening. And so we sat and listened to this, and it just kills you. It's so beautiful. And then, but in the middle of it is this little nugget of fear. And I thought, or foreboding, and I thought, that's what this man's life has been. So many people will tell you how much he helped them, but there's this terrible heart issue that's going to affect he retired and then really was sick for the rest of the time. So it's so interesting how life is like that. Eh? There's the beauty and there's the pain. And this is just the prayer time. Sorry. Shoot. Anyway, the talk today is really short, so feel a little balanced. Yeah, Pete.
I had Dr. Spencer before.
You what?
I had Dr. Spencer before.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's hold all these things up in our heart. Eh? Just do a moment of silence or two. I won't try to list them all again, but just think about the things that people have said, and let's hold up these people. Ask for goodness to come and touch them. Okay. So, here's the talk. You know, the last couple of weeks before we went away, rather than sort of bring stories from Scripture, I just read stories from Freda, who is a friend to some of us, quite a few, I think, over the years. And Freda's Passamaquoddy elder from Princeton side, from Robbinston, from Pleasant Point. And he has a great deal of wisdom about natural herbs and remedies. His grandmother was a wise woman in the Passamaquoddy tradition, and Freda was illiterate till he was 21, but he's a residential school survivor. And he did 9 years as a child in Nova Scotia at a residential school. And he has written a lot of stories, or he's told a lot of stories, and his partner, Leslie, has written them down, and then they've been crafting them. And it's possible, actually, that, you know, the first time I read the stories from him, I said, is there anybody here that could help? And there was a professor here visiting from a university in Ontario, and from Guelph, actually, and he said that He knows someone who does this kind of work and has done it before and has a connection to a publishing house in Nova Scotia. So he asked him if he would help, and so Fred and Leslie are considering this. So it's possible that it's a way forward to craft all the stories and present them in a published form finally. There are 49 stories so far. So anyway, I read one, and the first one that I read was quite lovely because it included hardship but also beauty from his childhood memories. The second one I read was much harder because it's about the abusive death of his best friend who was like a little brother to him. And so if you want to look on the website, you can see those stories, or as they were read a couple of weeks ago. I want you to keep that in mind. That's not what I'm going to do today. I have more stories from those guys. I'd love to have some kind of a group if anybody are interested. Maybe in the fall we could meet. Maybe Fredo will be able to come across the border and he can tell the stories, which would be much better. But it's possible that we can do more with that. And maybe I'll come back to it some weeks, but I don't want to do it every week. And today I wondered what I would do. And last night we were so done in from the funeral, really, that we just watched TV. I thought about maybe trying to do some complicated talk for today, and I went, not even close. So I woke up this morning, and I just had this great confidence, actually, that there'd be something living to say. And I found it in the news. So I'm going to try to share a scripture story today in the news. I want you to keep in mind what we've been doing with the residential stories, what it was like for Fred. I mean, if you heard those, or if otherwise, just use your imagination, I guess. And then what I want to do is see if there are any connections. What do you see? So first off, I'd like to start with the scripture story. So this is the story that's it's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it's in the middle of another story, and it's a story about healing that Jesus does. And mostly I just want to read it to you, and then I want you to tell me what you see. Does that make sense? And anything's okay. Like, anything's okay. And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him, on Jesus. Jesus is walking through the crowds. People are really excited. Healing has come from him to touch people. All kinds of people are gathering because of this. They wonder who he is, what is happening. Now there's a woman who'd been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather she grew worse. She'd heard about Jesus, and she came up behind him in the crowd, and she touched his cloak. For she said, if I but touch his clothes, I'll be made well. And immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd, and he said, who touched my clothes? And his disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say who touched me? He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. So there's story one. What do you see? What are the thoughts that come to you as you think about this today?
Something that strikes me is that Jesus knows that she was healed of her disease. She tells him herself that she was healed of her disease, and yet he still ends and says, and be healed of your disease. As if, I wonder if he meant something more than the healing that had already occurred.
Wow. Man, you got a penetrating brain. That's incredible. Okay, be healed and keep on being healed.
Or even, and be healed of the experience of having been diseased for 12 years and go on and live a new life,
Wow, that's an incredible thought. So, may you be so healed that you're even healed from the repercussions of being sick.
Yeah,
Wow.
because it must have been Like, I mean, Jess talked about this story and talked about the kind of probably isolation and public, you know, humiliation it must have been to
Outcast.
yeah, exactly, to have been bleeding as a woman for 12 years.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, thank you. More insights? What do you think? Yeah? Is Brian? Yeah.
I was just going to say that what struck me the most in that was the persistence of that woman to seek out healing. But she, because, as you said, her important thing here is the faith that she had. And I just think that it's, you know, when you're required healing, if you are persistent, Jesus will meet you there.
So what you really saw was the persistence. Like, she knew that she had a problem and she just wouldn't give up. She tried every avenue. I mean, she tried the normal accepted avenues and they weren't really helping. She went to the physicians. I spent all day yesterday with doctors. And I thought about saying this at the funeral, but I didn't. That, you know, I have white, what do you call it? White cloak syndrome. Every time I go to the doctor's office, my blood pressure goes up. And I was in a room full of doctors who wanted to say goodbye to their friend and a colleague, you know. So I was thinking, yeah, my blood pressure is here just even before we start, you know. Yeah. But she, so I've got all the honor in the world for medicine. I've got all the honor in the world for every attempt to figure things out. But it's not perfect. And here's a situation where she had just been hopelessly maltreated. You know, nobody knew how to help her, but they just kept taking her money. Yeah.
I like Jesus' persistence, actually.
You like Jesus' persistence. Why? What about that?
Well, he stops to find out who did it, and he wouldn't continue on until he did. His disciples are like, "Give me a break, Jesus. Let's go. We got this thing to do. Whatever." Everyone's touching him. It's like, no, this woman was important, and he needed to find her and talk to her. She could have just, run off, but she didn't, or whatever. He was able to find her. So I love Jesus' persistence.
I love Jesus' persistence. I love the way that you said this. This woman was important to him. He had to connect. So what does he know and what does he not know? He knows that somehow power has come from him, and he doesn't know where it's gone. He knows some things, he doesn't know everything. But he knows that something amazing has happened. That's interesting, eh? She has the sense that if she can just touch him, that she is going to get to some kind of an energy that's purer, better than what she's been facing. And I sometimes feel this with governments and with churches. I feel like almost like the place where we go for answers, sometimes that's where actually it's not hidden. There's something more precious hidden somewhere else. And she, in this case, it's this woman with her determination to touch this man. And somehow that's the lightning rod that connects her to the energy that actually is very, very wonderful for her. But I think, Walt, you had something. What were you going to say?
Just that he doesn't take any credit for it at all. Jesus, like, it's put totally on her.
Yeah.
And she hadn't even heard him before. Like, she just heard about him.
She never even heard him
Yeah,
talk.
She hadn't even heard him talk or anything.
She had just heard about him, and something raised her imagination, her hope, the possibility, and she pushes towards something better than normal in him, and then he takes absolutely no credit for it. He just says, "Wow, lady, this was you." Wow. Anybody else got anything?
I thought it was quite brave of her when he said, "Who touched me?" For her to like show herself and say, "Oh yeah, that was me." Like she easily could have melted away in the crowd and not, but for her to step up and say, I mean, he could have done it. He could have said, "You stole power from me. I'm giving you your curse back."
Okay, if he was the kind of God that some of us were trained God was like, sort of this judge that, okay, then maybe he'd say, lady, you didn't ask for that. But that's the exact opposite of the character that we see. We see a character of universal love. Okay, so what you see is the courage that it takes for her to step forward. I love that. Don't you love that? Like she has had a whole history of being an outcast for 12 years. And what does that trauma do to you? How do you think of yourself? And then suddenly somebody wants to put you on center stage in front of everyone. How does she have the courage to do this? That's great. Let's go to the next part, unless anybody else have anything. Okay, here's the next part. It's very different. What I want to do today is read an article that I read this morning from BBC News. You know how many times I say that this lady is a hero to me. Not that I understand everything that's going on in New Zealand, but I'm so impressed with the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. So many times, the stories that come to us, I don't know the ups and downs or the ins and outs of their economic system. I just don't know that. And I know that I have friends in New Zealand, and we've been to New Zealand several times. I have friends that admire her, even though they don't like her politics. So I think this is a person of great character who is leading a country, and every once in a while she does something that kind of shocks everybody else. A young woman who becomes the leader of the country, the first person to breastfeed in cabinet meetings. And she's a trailblazer. And then when there's the terrible shooting in Christchurch, and the people are massacred at the mosque, she's the person who wears a hijab to go and show empathy. She just is a person who time after time seems to emulate what it is to be a beautiful human being. And so today, this is what I read this morning. New Zealand's Prime Minister has formally apologized for an immigration crackdown in the 1970s against Pacific Islanders. The Dawn raids targeted people who overstayed their visas, deporting them to their countries of origin. They disproportionately affected Pacific Islanders, despite most visa overstayers being from the UK, Australia, and South Africa. Jacinda Ardern has now issued a formal and unreserved apology. Pacific Islander communities in New Zealand still suffer and carry the scars from this policy, she said, adding that she hoped the apology has brought some much-needed closure. Ms. Ardern spoke at a gathering of affected families, Pacific Island dignitaries, and government officials in Auckland. According to the news site Stuff, Princess Mele Silikutapu of Tonga, forgive me for the mispronunciation, of Tonga welcomed the New Zealand government's attempt to address the inhumane and unjust treatment of her people. She called the apology a dawn for my community. This is amazing. The dawn raids, I'll explain a little bit more. This is a dawn on the other side. This is a dawn for my people. Beginning in the early 1970s, the dawn raids saw government forces launch early morning operations in the homes and workplaces of people who had overstayed their visas. New Zealand had welcomed thousands of migrants from Pacific Islands after the end of World War II, needing workers for its booming economy. By 1976, the government says there were more than 50,000 Pacific Islanders in the country of New Zealand. But an economic crisis in the early 1970s caused unemployment to rise. Some politicians and in the press began to attack migrants. Raids began in 1974 and they continued through the decade. The policy spawned mounting criticism from religious, political, and civil groups until it was eventually halted by the start of the 1980s. New Zealand's Minister for Pacific Peoples, Aupito William Seal, was himself a victim of the operation. Born in Samoa before moving to New Zealand, he has said that the day of the raid was etched into my memory. To have someone knocking on the door in the early hours, flashlight in your face, disrespecting the owner of the home with an Alsatian dog frothing at the mouth wanting to come in, it is quite traumatizing, he said when Ms. Ardern announced the apology in June. This is a man who is now in New Zealand, from Samoa, from the Pacific Islands. He's now the minister in charge. What's his minister in charge of Minister for Pacific Peoples? I think that is an impressive step. But he is someone who, as a child, experienced this. Now, what do you hear in this story?
I can't even think of it without
It hurts too much to think about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's so full of injustice. We need you to build our economy. Now we don't want you because we're going through a bit of a hard time in our economy, so we'll project all the evil on you. It's these migrants. It's these migrants. They're taking our jobs. Let's get rid of them. And so you get rid of the people from the Pacific Islands because they have brown skin, but you let the people from South Africa, the whites from South Africa, the people from UK, people from Australia, they look like us. They can stay. Even if they've overstayed, they're welcome. Their visa. What else? What do you see? Yeah, Lee?
I see that this same story is repeated over and over and over worldwide, you know, to one people group after another, after another, after another, and I see us now starting to acknowledge what we have done. Just beginning. We're scratching the surface of it, I think. A much deeper issue of, you know, we're better, or we deserve, or we're entitled, or, you know, I think it's just beginning.
What you say makes my heart open a little bit, and it makes my eyes and my imagination see hope. Like, if this is a beginning, God bless us, you know. But you're right, over and over and over and over again, this story has played out in history. And especially it's played out wherever people have had great economic power over other people. And they've done whatever they could to sustain it.
I just think about reading about when Jewish children during the Second World War were put on a ship and brought to Canada. And in fact, people stood in Canada with placards saying no Jews and no dogs in Canada. And that ship was turned around and those children had to go back.
Yeah, many of them died.
It's dreadful. It's
Yeah.
just beyond dreadful. Or the I don't know, Japanese. Or I remember a friend when I was young who came from Czechoslovakia, and he said literally tanks rolled on their front lawn and his family escaped out the back door. Like, it's just such a repeated story. Of course, First Nations people, of course. I mean, that's the most outrageous and the one we're most accountable for.
Right. Right now, the thing that is breaking our heart is the treatment of people in residential schools for 100 years in 138 schools across the country. And to find the unmarked graves now that this process has finally been allowed. So this is what's breaking our heart, but it's part of the same story. And I was thinking the same thing. You know, when you go to nowadays there's a new Holocaust museum in Jerusalem, but the old one was even more powerful to me than the new one, because the new one's like a world-class beautiful museum, you know. But the first one was a little bit more rustic and raw. And the first thing that you saw when you walked in just killed you if you were Canadian, because it was the immigration minister at the time, who I think was a Baptist minister. And his words were, "None is too many," from Canada. That's the first thing you saw in Jerusalem. How many immigrants will we take from Europe when we know that the Jews are in trouble? None is too many. And the children and the boat, the St. Louis, the various boats that were turned away. It just kills you. It just kills you. Our you know, that we are part of cultures that have dominated and I've hurt others so badly sometimes. And you know, my background is Jewish, and my dad used to talk about this, that in Montreal, in great, I like how many times have I said this, but this is, he said at the golf courses, it was engraved in wood on the signs, no dogs or Jews. You know, he grew up in the Jewish community there. And he said he would have a wry smile and say it always make us kind of mad that they put dogs first. Mm. I mean, that's in the 1900s in Canada, you know.
I think we think as Canadians we're good guys. Like, you know,
We think we're good
nice
guys.
people. We say thank you and sorry and please a lot. And yet, we're no different.
So when I think of the first story and the lady who tried over and over again to get some kind of real healing, to me it speaks a little bit about us trying to live in our Canadian society and feel good about ourselves. I rejoice that this is a wonderful country, and I think you're right, there is some reason for hope. I think our hearts are breaking and we're getting a little better. But I think that it's, to me, like her persistence in doing the wrong thing, going to the people that she thinks is really going to help and really bring life, to me that's almost like our persistence in living a life of normal, that we think is all really pretty good and pretty happy, but we're surrounded by people that are hurting. We're surrounded by mental illness. We're surrounded by our own culpability from the past or from, you know, of our society. And so to pretend that it's okay and not to face it just seems like there's a better energy somewhere. And I've got a little 1-minute video, and I just wanted to show you this. It came with the BBC article. This is Jacinda.
Today.
What was that? What was it?
Oh, that was my radio.
That's an incredible. Yeah. At the end of this, can you just don't take it off quickly? Just hold it, okay? At the end.
Today, I stand on behalf of the New Zealand Government to offer a formal and unreserved apology to Pacific communities for the discriminatory implementation of the immigration laws of the 1970s that led to the events of the Dawn Raids. The government expresses its sorrow, remorse and regret that the Dawn Raids and random police checks occurred and that these actions were ever considered appropriate. Our government conveys to the future generations of Aotearoa that the past actions of the Crown were wrong and that the treatment of your ancestors was wrong. We convey to you our deepest and sincerest apology.
Can you go? It went so quickly. I want just the last second, if it's possible. Start it again and take it there, and then try to hold it, pause, at Jacinda's face, right at the end.
We convey to you our deepest and sincerest apology.
Now.
Today,
That's the opening shot, actually.
Oh, it's the opening shot?
Oh.
We've been looking at it this
If
whole
I don't
time.
start it again, that just is where it ends. by itself.
today, I stand on behalf.
And yeah.
That's what we've been looking at.
Yeah.
That's what you've been looking at all along?
Really.
It sounds okay to me. What do you see?
She's wearing their traditional lace, the necklace, right?
Oh, I bet there's meaning to that, and I don't know it, but I bet, way to go. She's wearing something to connect with the Pacific Islanders. I bet you're right.
It's interesting to watch the people of different ages who are listening, who are all crying. Some people who probably experienced it themselves, some people who maybe didn't experience it directly, but who their parents maybe experienced it, and or their grandparents maybe experienced the effects of the raids. It's interesting to watch, people who are probably weren't alive when it was happening, but who have heard the stories and just the generational effect.
That's amazing. But what I heard this from Indigenous friends first, but then I later heard a TED Talk that explained it in a different way. That when you experience trauma, it doesn't change your DNA. We have 3 billion pairs of chromosomes each. And there is really just 4 chemicals that are in specific sequence. And with this, and this is our DNA. When trauma happens, the chemicals don't change. But the situation of the chemicals changes. It's almost like knots are built. If someone is assaulted as a child, if someone sees something terrible, trauma can change not the order of the chemicals in your DNA, but it can change the situation of the chemicals, and that gets passed to the next generation. So Indigenous people have been telling me, we too experience this even if we didn't go to the residential schools. And I love the way you said, some people, you just look at the intensity of the faces on the younger people, but look at the tears in the eyes of the older people. Or both. Yeah, trauma goes on.
They've been hemorrhaging for generations.
They've been hemorrhaging for more than 12 years. And where were they looking for life? In sort of a normal situation where people, just civility, niceness, we've got a great country. Jeff, what were you going to say?
Well, it's just apologies. I'm well acquainted with apologies. I'm married.
Say it again. I couldn't quite hear it.
So I do it a lot.
You do a lot of apologizing because you're married?
Yeah. So I've often wondered with the whole thing about an apology from an official, and like something like this, or residential schools, they're wanting the Pope to come to Canada, stand on Canadian soil and make an official apology. And I question that. I can't understand the power of that. But it's acknowledgement from someone who had nothing to do with it, and maybe something that happened 100 years ago. But when, in this lady's case, she wasn't in power or whatever.
Right? She wasn't in power.
Acknowledging her country's government's actions. So I'm just trying to.
Does this even help?
With the power of apology and from high.
We're talking about 50 years ago. And I say over again, I love Maya Angelou's basic quote that's people love, it's, I did what I knew, when I knew better, I did better. I think we're merging into greater awareness of some of the ways that we've hurt other people. I think this is what gives us hope, is that we're beginning to realize it. But does this help at all? I thought about one story that Beth Wood told me. Beth Wood became a member of a church with an Indigenous guy in Winnipeg. And she said that he was a guy, the brightest, the nicest person, just everything about him. Everybody liked him. He always seemed to do well at everything, but he always shot himself in the foot. And it was like his life only got to a certain place, and then it stopped. And Beth had done a thesis for us in our graduate program at the university. And she said, there's the word poor in the Bible, but there's actually quite a few words for poor, and people are poor for different reasons. Some people are poor because they're lazy, and other people judge them. Some people are poor because of circumstances in life. Some people are poor because of oppression. And she says it's very, very different what happens to different people. And she said in this case, when she was living in Toronto later, and he happened to be living in Toronto too, he got a request to go to an Anglican church that wanted to do an exercise like this. And they wanted some Indigenous people there to receive an apology, even though, it's a generation different. And he said, okay, I'll go. And she said, he had no idea how much it would touch him. But the greatest demonstration of it came after the apology happened, because suddenly his life was free to go forward, and he stopped shooting himself in the foot. And I thought, there's a better energy somewhere. There's like the woman finds the perfect energy for her situation in Jesus, which heals her from that bleeding. But it's like our societies need to find that perfect energy, and maybe Jacinda's looking at it. Like, when I looked at her today, this is weird, like, this is not like doctrine that you should report me for to the Heresy Commission, but when I looked at her face here, I saw Jesus. Honestly, I just said, I'm just looking at Jesus today. I'm looking at Jesus in the face of a leader with empathy who wants to be accountable for the problems of the past. And even the way her head was turned. To me, it felt like Jesus on the cross as she's suffering from the pain of this, as she's trying to reach to the people.
And it's not just empathy, it's anguish.
It's not just empathy, it's anguish. Yeah, Lawrence.
It's hard, of course, not to think of Stephen Harper.
Say it again.
It's hard, of course, not to think of Stephen Harper and his apologies for the residential schools, which we all knew was not the last words on that. We especially know that this year. And
Come and say this. I think you know much more about this than I do. Would you please explain it? Explain the whole thing. No.
I was saying it's hard not to see this. It's hard to see this and not think of Stephen Harper, who apologized for the residential schools when he was in power. And we all know that those were not the last words on that. We know that the apology did not release the situation fundamentally because of a lack of follow-through, and in fact continuing to fight indigenous people in court on all kinds of levels, which the current government still is doing, by the way. It has not entirely shifted after that either. I'm thinking of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which had all of these recommendations for Canada to actually get to reconciliation, all kinds of things that needed to be done. And there has not been a lot of follow-through on that. So that's just what I'm thinking about this. Yes, I see something in that face that probably I would not see in Stephen Harper's face, but there needs to be more than expression too. Is kind of what I'm feeling, right? So what is that, and what does that look like? Politically too. Not just emotion is important, spirituality is important, but there has to be a concrete political side to it too, right?
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you very much. That helps. You know what else I loved? I loved the fact that in the BBC article it says part of the reason why the dawn raids stopped was because religious groups were offended and fought against the government. That seems, sometimes religious groups seem to be on the wrong side of arguments. To me it seems like, like the average is sort of 99% to 1. But I think in this, I was thrilled to read that the voice of the people raising up said, this is evil, stop it. And it took a decade,
Just another place where we can see what it means is in the different responses of the churches to the residential schools in recent decades. And so I don't want to pick on the Catholic Church, but the other main churches involved did their apologies pretty wholeheartedly and followed through with their
recommendation.
What they needed to do to some extent. And there was always some apology mixed in with the Catholic Church, but it was always mixed with self-defense and a holding back, both in the apologies and in the follow-through. And we can see now how much difference it makes in the way people respond, right? It makes a big sense.
Oh, that's fantastic too. Thank you. Yeah, not to pick on one group versus another. Oh, sorry, somebody, who is it? Wilma, it's you? I thought you were pointing at somebody else.
I was just wanting to say, one of the things that I read that I think speaks to Jeff's point is Indigenous people saying it's not like we're asking for restitution, we just want people to sit with us in our sorrow. And that was really moving for me, because what can we do?
like interpersonally, we may not even know an Indigenous person up close, depending on who we are. And you can never pay for what was done to them, never. Dollar figures will not do it. So the fact that sitting with somebody as a country, sitting with people in their sorrow, counts for something, I thought that was really great. And then the other thing is, let's have drinking water everywhere.
Let's have drinking water everywhere.
Like that's, I think that's
Yeah.
all through the,
Apparently, this week, the new laws have been put in place that are going to ensure that that happens. We will see. But that's apparently a major change took place in Canada this week. Yeah. And it's not a promise anymore, it's a law. Yeah. So, okay, so this is it. This is everything for this talk. I just wanted to bring these stories and to just sort of, I don't know, make us think. Where is the best way forward? Where's the touch of the garment? By the way, I just couldn't help myself and I looked up the word garment, because it says that we often used to talk about maybe they're touching Jesus' prayer shawl or something, but in Mark's gospel it doesn't say that. It just says the lady touched his clothes. But the word for clothes that's used is, in Jesus' day, it was very normal to wear two robes. One was sort of a flowing undergarment made of wool, and the other one was an outer one that people wore to be presentable in public. So the word that's used here is for his outer garment. I just think even if she doesn't get to touch him himself, if she just gets in the right direction, if she just gets to touch the outer, if I could just turn my heart toward the right direction, So think about it for societies, think about it for us and ourselves. What have we been doing for years that doesn't actually help our condition? What have we been doing that took all our money and in the end never healed us? I thought, what about the persistence to find the thing that will actually help us to walk forward into a better tomorrow? Zoe's got one last song.
Thanks. Need to give myself a little bit of elbow room. This last song is called River Goddess, and I'm just going to do it a cappella, Bill. I had this character of a river goddess sort of floating into my mind a couple of times while walking by the water, and then I finally had a dream about her, and she was this Passamaquoddy princess. She was like a chief's daughter or something. I got from her grandeur, but she took up the whole river, like the rapids at Dover Hill was where I was seeing her, and it was like the rapids were her skirt just rushing down. And the next day after this dream walking by the river, I thought, I think that she wants a song. That might be what I have to offer. I should say too that something that touched me later about it is I realized she came to me just before the news broke about the first mass unmarked grave being found. Yeah. Rushing skirts of layered lace from a dress of diamond blue. Stones adorn my shoulders. Stones adorn my shoulders. I sing for you to hear me. The wind carries my song. I sing from multitudes within me. I sing to carry on. I sing to carry on. carrying spirits on the tide, and the feathers falling by my side, cloaked in universes unseen, cloaked in universes unseen, cloaked in universes unseen. I sing for you to hear me. The wind carries my song. I sing from multitudes within me. I sing to carry on. I sing to carry on.
You can have the chair back. So I just pray for the touch of the outer garment, the touch of the right direction to be for all our lives, and for us to do our best to bring that grace, that energy, that love from God, that light wherever we are. Amen.